The half square 4-in-1 triangle ruler, designed by Brenda Henning, features 4 different ways to do half square triangles on one tool. This ruler has our signature grip on the back, so it will not move when you are either marking the lines that you want to use for your half square triangles, trimming them down to size, or cutting them. So as you can see, there's grip here, there's grip under all the numbers, and around the entire outside edge. In the instructions, we will show you how to use each one of the different techniques built into the ruler. The first technique uses these dashed black and white lines that run across the width of the ruler. To use those, I can take a half square triangle that, here's the seam line, it's already been sewn, and I can trim it down to size by putting those dashed lines on the seam line and trimming 2 sides like this, and I can square it up to size before I press it open. The second method explained in the instructions uses this portion of the ruler. If I want to cut half square triangles from strips, I can use these measurements and literally rotate the triangle, and every time I move, I'm going to be cutting a pair of triangles. The third method incorporates these slots that are built into the ruler. So if I want to take a set of half square triangles and draw lines and sew on each side of it, I can use the slots to do that. The fourth technique that's built into the ruler are these nested squares right here, because I can take those nested squares, place the diagonal line on the seam line, and trim this, flip it around, and it's going to be the exact size of those squares. So those are the 4 techniques that you can use to make half square triangles, and now we'll go into more detail. Now, in the first technique, in the instructions, we show you how to do them out of large squares. If you notice, this is a 10-inch square. I drew diagonal lines with my ruler from corner to corner in each direction, and I put small pins in here so it didn't shift when I sewed. Then I sewed 1/4 inch on each side of those lines, and this is a 10-inch square, so I cut it 5 inches horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, and that gives me 8 half square triangles that quickly. Now, on method 1, I can take those half square triangles, and before I even press them open, I can go down here to the dash lines and place them, and I place it a little below the seam line to allow for any distortion when pressing it open, and I literally trim it down to size. Remember, these are the finished size. So these are going to measure 4.5 inches right now. And when they're finished in my project, these are going to be 4-inch finished half square triangles. Now, the second technique is where we are cutting them from strips. So you take your strips, put them right sides together so they're ready to take and chain into your machine. And if you notice, this black tip is going to be on the top of my strip. I'm going to angle my strip a little bit because it makes it easier for me to cut them. And see, this is here. I'm going to line it up with the edge, which I've already trimmed so it's a straight edge. This is a 2.5-inch strip, so I'm placing the 2.5-inch strip line on there, and they're going to finish to 2 inches. So I'll cut one, rotate the ruler, and the 2.5-inch line is going to be on the bottom. This little tip is going to be off the top, and every time I rotate the ruler, I'm going to get a half square triangle. So that's how you use the strip method. Once again, it has grip on the back, which makes it very easy so nothing moves. The third method uses these slots because many patterns ask you to draw a line across the diagonal. If you need to do that, you can use this straighter edge right here. If you like to draw the sewing lines on each side of it, we've incorporated that into the ruler too. So you place the black line on the center diagonal line, draw on the outside, which will give me my 1/4 inch, and then I'll place my pencil or whatever marking tool you're using right next to the acrylic so it's as accurate as possible and go out in both directions. And now I have drawn my sewing lines, and I'll cut on the center line. Once again, I'll get 2 sets of half square triangles from each square. Now, the fourth technique in the ruler allows you to trim them after they've been pressed open, and that is these nested squares that appear right here. So here I have a half square triangle that I want to trim down to 3.5 inches. So I'm going to place the diagonal line, or the dashed white line right here across the ruler, and trim 2 sides. And then I'm going to flip the square around, and you'll see that that dash line is going to go across the middle. It's going to stop right here at each corner, so that that sewing line is going to go right into the tip of the square, and these black lines are going right down the edges, so I can trim the other 2 sides. Now this is going to measure 4 inches at this point, because it's going to finish 3.5 inches in my project. So it doesn't matter which method you need to use, which one that the pattern calls for, it can all be done with the same tool.